Hi, thanks for joining me for today's devotion. I'm coming to you from my new office. It's not furnished yet, but it's finished. Our reading today is from Job chapter 1, verses 20 and 21. After hearing he had lost all of his great wealth, and his sons and daughters had died in a storm, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." Maybe you know what it's like to have someone come to you with tragic news. You can tell something's wrong before they even begin. You can see it on their face. There's that awful guessing game you play where you try to imagine all the bad things that might have happened. And then they tell you, and your heart sinks. It's worse than you imagined. If you haven't had this experience, I pray you never do, but Job did. Job was a believer who had great wealth and a large family, and one day his world came crashing down. A messenger came with horrific news of an attack. Armed enemies had killed Job's servants and stolen all of his oxen and donkeys, 1,000 animals. Another messenger came with an unbelievable report. A storm with the wrath of God behind it destroyed all of Job's sheep. A third messenger brought news of another attack. More servants had been killed, and all of Job's camels were gone. These three messages hit Job in rapid succession like waves hitting a sinking ship. In less than a minute, Job had just learned that all of his wealth was gone. And we like to imagine that bad things happen in threes, but a fourth messenger showed up before the third was even done speaking. How could things get any worse? Job could see the messenger's face. You could hear his tone of voice. "Your sons and daughters," said the messenger. Did he even need to finish? He had to. There'd been a storm, and all of Job's children, 7 sons and 3 daughters, were dead. We know that suffering is real, and we know it firsthand. Maybe you suffer visibly in a way others see, or maybe you suffer behind the scenes in a way only you see. It happens to different people in varying degrees, but there are no exceptions. We all suffer, all of us. Why? Well, if there were ever an explanation for why we suffer, you'd think we'd find it in the book of Job, but no explanation is given. God shows us all the horrible things this great believer Job had to suffer, but he doesn't reveal to us why. It's as if God is saying to us, this is how things are now. And we can't help but notice it didn't used to be this way. Back in the days of the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve had no idea what it was like to hear tragic news. They never had to take cover from a storm. They were never attacked. Everything in God's perfect world changed when Adam and Eve fell into sin. And that's how bad sin is. That's how bad my sin is and yours. We like to imagine that we're basically pretty good people. Even when our sin hurts someone, we may pretend we are innocent. But in case we miss how bad sin is and all the damage our sin causes us and others, the evidence is around us every day in a form we might not think about. Look at all the suffering. If there were no sin, there would be no suffering. Job gets it. When Job hears what happened, he tears his robe and shaves his head. He falls to the ground in worship. He doesn't know why any of this has happened to him, but he does know this. He knows he's a sinner. And he also knows who God is. He says, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." God had given Job everything he had. Job didn't deserve any of it, and now God had taken things away. Nearly everything had changed in Job's life, but God was still God. Job calls God Lord, the name that means that God doesn't change. God had promised to send a Savior, and God would keep that promise. Now that Savior has come. As bad as sin is, yours, mine, everyone's, Jesus has come and has dealt with it. He didn't pretend sin and suffering isn't so bad. He suffered and died for you and me. He didn't come with an explanation. He came with redemption. Jesus redeemed you with his holy, precious blood, me too, and with his innocent suffering and death. Other gifts that God gives us may be temporary. He may give them for a time and then take them away, but not this one. God has given us his Son as payment for our sin, and he will never take him away. So when suffering comes to us, we don't have to pretend everything is okay. God forbid that tragedy should strike us, but if God in his wisdom allows it to happen, we don't have to hitch all our hopes on finding an explanation. Even if there were an explanation we could understand, would it help? We have something better than explanations. We have a Redeemer. In Jesus, our sin is forgiven. Because of him, God is on our side, and nothing can separate us from his love. Jesus is our refuge in every storm. Jesus is our solace in all our suffering, and whatever suffering we face, it's temporary. Later in his book, Job says, I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes, I and not another. How my heart yearns within me. What a glorious future awaits us. In the meantime, God has a messenger for us and all believers in this world. By the example of Job, he calls us to be patient. By the words of Job, he gives us the source of all true patience. True patience comes from the name of the Lord. When suffering comes, when tragedy strikes, even when we die, his name won't change. He is our Redeemer. May the name of the Lord be praised. See you next time.